Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're starting a brand new book. As part of our book series, we have 13 books, and in this Pali Canon and English study group, we study volumes 2 through volumes 13. We're about halfway through this entire study group. It takes about a year and a half to complete the entire study program, and we're in volume 9, which is titled The Six Sense Spaces. We're going to be moving into this book and helping you to understand this very important topic in order to make your way to this enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. As we go in the class, I'm going to be seeing if there's any volunteers in Zoom who would like to read any of the chapters that I'm going to be sharing as part of today's study group. And if you'd like to volunteer to read any of the chapters, you can just electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions. And you can also volunteer to raise your hand as well in Zoom. As you are choosing to ask questions during our study group, you can do that by putting those into the Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand. So the way that this program works is students will oftentimes be reading these chapters before and or after class. And then when we come to class, we read the chapter in the class, and then I share some teachings on that and open up to any questions that you might have. So as you guys have questions, you can use those various options to help you get answers to the questions that you have. So I'm going to switch over to displaying the chapters for today's class. And here we're starting with the very first chapter in volume 1, which is titled The Six Sense Spaces. This is where Gotama Buddha is going to introduce you to the six sense spaces and help you to understand what they are and a couple of other little details as we start moving into understanding the six sense spaces more and more. So this one, chapter 1, is titled The Six Sense Spaces. Here's the words of the Buddha. Monks, there are these six sense spaces. What six? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. When, monks, a noble disciple understands as they really are the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these six sense spaces, then he is called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destination, with nibbana, enlightenment, as his destination. So here the Buddha is just introducing the six sense spaces and helping you to understand that you would need these in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer. We refer to this first stage of enlightenment as a stream enterer because once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's only a matter of time before you get to enlightenment. You're either going to get to enlightenment in this life or some future life, a maximum of 7 rebirths. So just like a log enters the stream, it's going to eventually get to the ocean. A stream enterer, one who's entered the stream, you will eventually get to enlightenment either in this life or some future life. And in order to get to that first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to know the six sense spaces. There's other things you're going to need to know and practice as well. And you're going to need to eliminate certain fetters and understand certain teachings. But here the Buddha is just cluing in on this particular teaching. So this isn't the only thing you need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. It's just one of multiple things that you would need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So here the six sense spaces are the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. You might have studied the five senses in science class, learning biology or some other aspects of teachings. You might have learned the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, but we also consider the mind to be a sense base in the teachings of the Buddha. And here's why. The eye is coming in contact with a physical form. And now the mind with craving is going to either be experiencing agreeable contact or disagreeable contact. If you get agreeable contact through the eyes, seeing a physical form that you agree with, you may get pleasant feelings, those conditioned pleasant feelings of happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. Then when you aren't getting your craving fulfilled because you can't get what you want permanently, then your mind's going to move to these painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, guilt, shame, fear, the stress, anxiety. Those are the painful feelings that the mind will experience based on some condition. So when there's craving in the mind, you're going to be experiencing these conditioned feelings. So for example, if you see the sun outside, that's a certain form that you might get excited about because you see the sun, but it's based on a condition of the sun. And since the sun is impermanent, your happiness is impermanent as well. So now when it starts raining, you might get angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed because it's raining. And this is the same thing that's happening with the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. The eye is seeing physical forms. The ear is hearing certain sounds. The nose is smelling certain odors. The tongue is experiencing certain flavors. The body is coming in contact with certain physical objects. And the mind has certain mental objects. So I think you guys can probably understand the agreeable, disagreeable with craving based on the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and the body. Well, what the mind is doing is in the present moment, you can be thinking about things in the past. And now, in the present moment, you experience discontentedness due to certain thoughts and thinking you have in the past, or certain things for the future. So let's just say you're dozing off at night and you're laying in your bed and your mind is kind of thinking about different things. If there are certain challenges that you experienced in the past, maybe very painful things, maybe harmful things that have happened, maybe physical abuse, sexual abuse, maybe you've been robbed or beat up or something like this. If your mind is thinking about that in the present moment, you can experience painful feelings in the present moment based on something in the past. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body. It's just the mind itself. And then the same thing about the future. Let's just say you're at work and you planned a holiday 3 months from now, and you're at work thinking about this holiday and daydreaming about it. And now you get all these conditioned pleasant feelings based on these thoughts of going on holiday. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body in this example. It's just the mind thinking about the future and getting conditioned feelings. So that's why it's a sixth sense base, is that the mind can be in the past or can be in the future, and you're training for the mind to not be doing that through all the different steps on the path to enlightenment. So here, these are called the internal sense bases. Here, we're just referring to them as the sense bases. When we refer to them generally, we refer to them as the sense bases, the six sense bases, these six things. But then you're going to see today that we actually refer to these as the internal sense bases, and then there's the external sense bases, which are the thing that the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind are coming in contact with. The eye is coming in contact with a form, the ear is coming into contact with sounds, the nose is coming in contact with odors, the tongue is coming in contact with flavors, the body is coming in contact with physical objects, and the mind is coming in contact with the mental objects. And what the Buddha is helping you to understand here is what's causing your mind to be discontent. He's starting to expose you to true reality, helping you to see the natural laws, that when there's central desire in the mind's going to be longing and yearning through these sense bases. That's what the mind is doing when it has craving, desire, attachment. In the Four Noble Truths, when a student first is learning those, we're just talking about craving, desire, attachment in general. But as you get deeper into the teachings, you realize that this craving, desire, attachment is in the mind. It's called central desire, and the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases, craving permanently agreeable contact through the sense bases. The mind wants to see permanently agreeable things. So if you see a mother and child walking down the street holding hands, you might get all these pleasant feelings and feel so happy that you see this. But then when you turn the corner and you see a parent slapping their child across the face, you might get painful feelings because now this is disagreeable to you. In this example, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, because I think it's very unwise to hit anybody, especially a child. But here what we're talking about is, why is the mind discontent when it sees that parent hit the child? It's because the mind has central desire. It's longing and yearning through the sense bases, wanting agreeable contact. And when it gets agreeable contact, it'll get conditioned pleasant feelings. But when it gets disagreeable contact, like the parent slapping someone across the face, now this is disagreeable to you and you'll experience the painful feelings. And you can't see permanently agreeable things. It's just not possible. So you're working to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, realizing that all these things in the material world are all impermanent. Same thing with the ear. The ear is longing for permanently agreeable contact. So if you're at a stoplight and a car pulls up next to you with music that you like, you might be like, yeah, that's my jam. All right. Yeah, I really like that music. All right, let's dance. Let's have some fun in our chair as we're sitting there at the red light. But then you go to the next red light, and now somebody else pulls up next to you and there's music that you don't like. It's disagreeable to you. And now you get frustrated, you get irritated, you get annoyed. And now the same thing through the nose. There's certain odors that you find pleasant and you'll get conditioned pleasant feelings. But then maybe you're walking past a sewer and you smell the sewer and you're repulsed by it. Oh gosh, this is so horrible. Right? This is what's going on through the nose. And then the same thing with the tongue. There's certain flavors that you find agreeable and disagreeable. And if you taste, say, a piece of chocolate, it's like, oh, wow, that tastes so great. And you get all these pleasant feelings. But now maybe you taste something that's very sour and you might be repulsed by it, depending on what cravings are in your mind. And then there's certain physical objects that are coming in contact with the body or not. Say you're walking down the street and you've got all this space on the sidewalk and you have all these pleasant feelings because you've got all this space on the sidewalk. But now say somebody bumps into you and their shoulder hits you. Right? Again, we're not talking about what's wise or unwise, but these things are going to happen from time to time. We're in this world and we're amongst all these different beings. You might get bumped into. Now, if you find that to be disagreeable, you might get frustrated or agitated or annoyed. And then we also talked about things related to the mind. So this is what the 6 sense bases are doing to contribute to this discontentedness. That if there's central desire in the mind, that longing, yearning, the mind is now longing through these sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. But because of the universal truth of impermanence, it's impossible for the mind to get permanently agreeable contact through these sense bases. So you're just setting yourself up to experience discontentedness. The Buddha says that when a monk, a noble disciple, understands as it really is the gratification, danger, and escape in the case of these 6 sense bases. So a noble disciple, this is how the Buddha referred to students who were studying his teachings very closely. A individual who was born into an affluent family during the lifetime of the Buddha was considered noble. And they would walk around with their right shoulder exposed as they walked in the public, and people would know that they're an affluent family in their nobility. Where if you were born into a family that lacked resources, you were considered to be in a low family, and your life was considered to be destined for difficult situations, difficult circumstances, and it was thought that, you couldn't really escape this. And the people who were born into noble families, they were destined for this great, wonderful life. And the Buddha was helping people to see that, no, it's not about where you're born or what you have in terms of material possessions, because remember, he was born as a prince in a royal family. He was teaching that it's about the wisdom that you have. It's about how you conduct yourself in the world. It's about your verbal actions, your bodily actions, and your mental actions. It's about how you do things in the world, and now you're going to experience certain results, the cause and effect, the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So even if someone was born into a family that was considered a low family, when they would come to ordain with the Buddha, they would put on a robe and they would expose their right shoulder, that they were nobility, because Here, the Buddha is helping people to see that it's all about your wisdom. And if you're a noble disciple, you're studying his teachings very closely. And here he's saying, if you understand the gratification, this is how the mind has central desire and it wants to be gratified in the world. It's longing and yearning through these sense bases. The danger of this is that you're going to experience discontentedness, those conditioned feelings. And if you allow the mind to chase after pleasant feelings, the danger is that you're going to experience painful feelings at some point. It's only a matter of time, because whatever condition existed in order to produce the pleasant feelings, that condition is not permanent. So therefore, when that condition changes, your mind's going to go from pleasant feelings to painful feelings, because those feelings are temporary. They're conditioned. They arise, they change, and they fade away. So the danger is that your mind's experiencing this discontentedness going up and down because of this central desire. That's the gratification. Now the escape from all of this is the Eightfold Path. That's how you escape all of this up and down. That's how you eliminate the discontentedness, is by learning and practicing the Eightfold Path. And tomorrow, in our group learning program, I'm going to be teaching the Eightfold Path in its entirety, from the beginning to the end, using the words of the Buddha. So here the Buddha is saying, someone who studies really deep and understands these teachings, they understand gratification, the danger, and the escape of the six sense bases. And if you understand those, among other things that he talks about in other discourses, he's saying you are in the first stage of enlightenment. Okay, you're going to need other things besides just this, but this is one of the things that you'll need in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. Once you get to the first stage of enlightenment, he says you're no longer bound to the nether world. What this is the lower realms of existence: hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. The Buddha never used rebirth as a way to guilt, shame, or fear you into learning and practicing his teachings. And he never used rebirth in the heavenly world as a way to incentivize you or motivate you to learn his teachings. He's just explaining to you what true reality is. And being born into hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirit realm, it's not a permanent existence, but it's very challenging to get out of those realms and move into a realm like the human realm or the heavenly realm with an opportunity to get to enlightenment. Because from the human and heavenly realm, you can get to enlightenment and escape this whole cycle of rebirth. Heavenly realm is not ideal. That's not where you're interested in residing. And it's not a permanent existence. Those beings are still in the cycle of rebirth and still experiencing discontentedness. But by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you're no longer going to be reborn into the lower realms: hell, animal, and afflicted spirits. Because in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you would have needed to develop your mind to a certain extent with the teachings of the Buddha in order to train the mind to eliminate certain pollutions from the mind. And having done so, you will be functioning as a better and better human being. Training your mind on the path to enlightenment and cultivating wisdom, you're going to be functioning as a better and better human being. So that's why when you get to the first stage of enlightenment, functioning at that level of proficiency with your moral conduct and your wisdom and your mental discipline, now if you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn back into the world in the human realm. Excuse me. If you die in the first stage of enlightenment, you will be reborn back into the human realm because you've become a better human being. Whereas if you're short of the first stage of enlightenment and maybe doing unwholesome things, there's the potential that you would be reborn into the lower realms. But once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, you are not going to be reborn into the lower realms. You are no longer bound to the nether world. You will only make forward progress from there, either moving into the second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment in this life or some future life, but you won't be reborn into the lower realms. And that's what the Buddha is saying here, is that by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you are fixed in destination, with enlightenment as his destination. It's only a matter of time, either in this life or some future life, that you'll get to enlightenment. So getting to the first stage of enlightenment is an ideal attainment, that you would like to get to that attainment. But you shouldn't set your goal at getting to the first stage of enlightenment. Instead, set your goal to get to arahantship at the fourth stage of enlightenment. And if you fall short of that, okay, maybe you're in the third stage or you're in the second stage or what have you. But if you set your sights on the first stage and you fall short of that, that would be very unwise. So some people choose to set their sights on the first stage of enlightenment, which I think is very unwise. Instead, I suggest you focus it on getting to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind is actually enlightened, because then you can actually attain it. But if for some reason you happen to fall short of it, then you're still have made significant progress. So let me know what questions you guys have on this particular chapter. You can ask those questions by putting them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to move on to the next chapter. And as I do, I just would like to point out for those of you guys that haven't taken these classes before, that each one of these chapters, they have the reference, which goes back to the original source teachings of the Buddha, that you can see what he was talking about before this or after this, and you can confirm that these are the words of the Buddha. Then you have words from me that are reflections to be able to help you and guide you in further understanding the content that the Buddha is sharing. And you'll see this in each individual chapter, that there's content from me to be able to help you. So you can access these books by downloading them from our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. You can take that file and go print it. You can order printed versions on Amazon, and you can even just read it on your electronic device if you like as well. Because as you're reading the words of the Buddha and basing your life practice of your path to enlightenment on the original words of the Buddha, then you'll be able to see what he taught and what he didn't teach. As long as you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. You're going to need to study with the original words of the Buddha in order to get to enlightenment itself. Instead of studying with all different kinds of words from all different kinds of people that you can't necessarily independently verify, you would like to use the original words of the Buddha. If you need to go back to the original source text, you can, but then you can learn them, you can reflect on them, and you can practice them. You can independently verify the truth. Like what I was just describing with the 6 sense bases, you should be able to see some of those examples and how, yes, indeed, that is exactly what your mind is doing. So by learning with the original words of the Buddha like this, you'll be able to then make your way to enlightenment. So if you go to buddhadailywisdom.com, you'll be able to access the original words of the Buddha, and the books are completely free. You don't have to pay for them at all. And like I said, you can read on your electronic device, you can print them, you can order printed copies if you like. Amazon's going to charge a fee for their printed books and things like that, but nonetheless, you have access to these at no cost. So here, the second chapter is the simile of the great log. This is where you're going to learn some things related to the path to enlightenment in the 6 sense bases, and using this analogy of the log entering the stream. So here, the simile of the great log. Do you see, monks, that great log being carried along by the current of the river Ganges? Yes, venerable sir. If, monks, that log does not veer towards the near shore, does not veer towards the far shore, does not sink in midstream, does not get caught up on high ground, does not get caught by human beings, does not get caught by non-human beings, does not get caught in a whirlpool, and does not become inwardly rotten, it will slant, slope, and incline towards the ocean. For what reason? Because the current of the river Ganges slants, slopes, and inclines towards the ocean. So too, monks, if you do not veer towards the near shore, do not veer towards the far shore, do not sink in midstream, do not get cast up on high ground, do not get caught by human beings, do not get caught by non-human beings, do not get caught in a whirlpool, and do not become inwardly rotten, you will slant, slope, and incline towards nibbana, enlightenment. For what reason? Because right view slants, slopes, and inclines towards nibbana, enlightenment. Okay, I'm going to pause right here for a moment and share this with you guys. So what right view is the Four Noble Truths. This is what I taught last Sunday in our group learning program, where you're learning the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause, the elimination, and the path forward. The problem in the unenlightened mind is discontentedness, the mind experiencing conditioned feelings, where the mind's going up and down at various times in your life based on some condition. The second noble truth is explaining to you craving, desire, attachment is that condition. That's the condition that is causing the mind to experience these feelings of going up and down and up and down. When the mind's longing and yearning through these sense bases with craving, desire, attachment, then you're going to experience discontentedness. It's only a matter of time. The third noble truth is explaining that the elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And the fourth noble truth is explaining to you that the Eightfold Path is the perfect plan to be able to then eliminate craving, desire, attachment using all the various steps on the Eightfold Path. Essentially what right view is having the right view that your mind is causing its own discontent feelings. As long as you believe that other people are causing your mind to be discontent, then you're going to continue to experience discontentedness, because it's not other people that are causing your mind to be discontent. Other people aren't causing you to be angry, frustrated, irritated, annoyed, or some other discontent feeling. The mind is causing it itself. So if you have wrong view, you will be blaming other people for your discontentedness. And then you'll typically push people away with aversion. You'll become bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive, and people might choose to leave your life. Or you'll put your expectations on people, putting pressure on them to try to get your cravings fulfilled so that they will do things your way. And the mind is confused here. It's having this lack of wisdom. So with right view firmly established in the mind, where you can see with 100% certainty that your mind is causing its own discontentedness, the Buddha is saying that slants, slopes, and inclines towards enlightenment. Because once you have a breakthrough to understanding that your mind is causing its own discontentedness, you know what that cause is, then you know what the elimination and the escape is, and you can start applying the techniques and you can escape this discontent feelings. So you can get to this peaceful and joyful mental state of enlightenment if you establish right view. It slants, slopes, and inclines towards enlightenment. So when this was said, a certain monk asked the perfectly enlightened one, "What, venerable sir, is the near shore? What is the far shore? What is sinking in midstream? What is getting cast up on high ground? What is getting caught by human beings? What is getting caught by non-human beings? What is getting caught in a whirlpool? What is inwardly rotten?" The near shore monk, this is a designation for the 6 internal sense bases. The far shore, this is a designation for the 6 external sense bases. Sinking in midstream, this is a designation for excitement and desire. Getting cast up on high ground, this is a designation for the conceit, I am. So here the near shore is the internal sense bases. So the Buddha is saying if you veer towards this near shore, meaning that these internal sense bases, or you veer towards the far shore, which is the external sense bases of forms, of sounds, of odors, of flavors, of physical objects and mental objects, you're going to get caught up, and this log isn't going to be able to get to the ocean, which is enlightenment. So he's alerting you that you can get caught up in these sense bases because the mind's longing and yearning through them. This is what the third one is, where he says sinking midstream. This is the designation for the excitement and desire, the craving, desire, attachment, the wants, the expectations, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. That's the desire. And what the mind's doing is it's chasing this excitement. The mind is chasing these pleasant feelings. It's longing and yearning for this excitement. And if you get what you want, you get happy and excited and elated. But since you can't always get what you want, your mind's going to ultimately end up in the painful feelings. So if you're sinking in midstream, then that means you're allowing the desire to continue and you're chasing after excitement, these conditioned feelings. Getting cast up on high ground, this is the arrogance, the ego, the boastfulness, the conceit that's in the mind. That's what it means to get cast up on high ground, because you think you're higher than somebody else and you might look down on others and you might look down on people. The solution for this is to reside humble. And there's teachings that you can learn in Volume 1, Chapter 16 to eliminate the ego. Just as dangerous as it is to put yourself above people, it's also just as dangerous to put yourself below people. If there's certain people, like maybe a famous celebrity or a president or prime minister of your country, or maybe your boss or someone you admire, if when you come around that person, you're all shaken up because you think that they're so much higher than you, your mind's going to be all uncalm. So if you have conceit where you put yourself above people, there's going to be certain situations where you also put yourself below people, and your mind's going to be shaken up there as well. And you would like to practice where you look at all beings equally. Even if other people are choosing to have this pecking order in their mind, you're going to need to eliminate that in order to eliminate this conceit, because you can get caught up on this high ground where the mind is arrogant and boastful, and thus you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment, because as long as you're arrogant and boastful, people will push you aside. People will, look at you and kind of reject you because they consider you to be egotistical and arrogant and boastful. So now the Buddha continues. He says, "And what, monks, is getting caught by human beings? Here, someone lives in association with household practitioners. He rejoices with them and sorrows with them. He is happy when they are happy and sad when they are sad. And he involves himself in their affairs and duties. This is called getting caught by human beings. And what, monk, is getting caught by non-human beings? Here, someone lives the holy life with the aspiration to be reborn into a certain order of heavenly beings, thinking, by this virtue or vow or austerity or holy life, I will become a heavenly being, or one among the heavenly beings. This is called getting caught up by non-human beings." Okay, let me explain this to you. So getting caught up by human beings, this is where if you have a friend or family member or coworker and they're either like really happy and really excited, and you choose to get really happy and excited with them, that means your feelings are attached to the people around you. Your mind is being conditioned that the condition is that if everybody else is excited, I'm going to be excited too. But then the problem with that is that then when everyone else is sorrowful and sad, you're going to be sorrowful and sad too. Some people think that this is actually desirable, that this isn't, though, what you would like to do. This is allowing your mind to be attached to what other people are doing. And your feelings are now conditioned based on what other people are experiencing. So if your mom is happy or your dad's happy, you might be happy. But if your mom is sad and sorrowful, or your dad is sad and sorrowful, you might be sad and sorrowful too. This is getting caught up with human beings. Instead, what you would like to do is practice where you understand people's feelings, but you're not dwelling in their feelings. It's kind of like if somebody was in quicksand, if you got down into the quicksand with them, you would be useless. You wouldn't be able to help this person out of the quicksand. So by you choosing to have the same excitement and sorrowful feelings as an individual, it's like getting down into the quicksand with them. Instead, what the Buddha teaches is you should stand on solid ground, on stable ground. Reach out your hand, and if somebody chooses to grab your hand and you can pull them, and they can pull and they can kick, then you can get them out of the quicksand. You can help them out of the quicksand. But if you allow your mind to get down into the conditioned pleasant feelings and painful feelings, you're just getting down into the quicksand with them. So the Buddha is teaching you to remain unattached to other people's feelings or emotions. That doesn't mean that you're not caring or you don't have concern. You have concern, you have care, but you don't allow your mind to dwell in those unwholesome feelings, because it would just make your mind go up and down based on everybody else. So that means you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment until everybody else got to enlightenment. When everybody else is peaceful, then you'll be peaceful. But that's not the way to get to enlightenment. The way to get to enlightenment is to understand that people's minds are going to be going up and down around you, but you're not interested in conforming to what they're experiencing. So this is how you can ensure that your mind doesn't get caught up with human beings, is to notice that other people's minds are going up and down, and don't allow your mind to be attached to that and also go up and down. Getting caught up by non-human beings is having this desire to be reborn into the heavenly realm, that you want to be reborn into the heavenly realm. If you have this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, this yearning to be reborn into the heavenly realm, you still have craving, desire, attachment. This is getting caught up by non-human beings. So it will be unwise to be having this craving, desire, attachment, this longing, this yearning, this wanting to be reborn into the heavenly realm, because now with that craving, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. Now, the next one that the Buddha talks about, he says, getting caught in a whirlpool. This, monk, is a designation for the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. What this is you've now been learning in this class what the internal sense base is, which is the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. And then you've learned what the external sense base is, which are the physical forms, which are the sounds, the odors, the flavors, the physical objects, and the mental objects. Well, the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, this is how the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases. That's the craving, that's the desire, that's the chord. It's like the eye is tied to forms, or the ear is tied with a cord to sounds, or the nose is tied with a cord to odors, or the tongue is tied with a cord to flavors, or the body is tied to physical objects. This is the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. So when we talk about the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, we don't involve the mind in this one, even though it's one of the 6 sense bases. So getting caught up in the whirlpool is allowing this craving, desire, attachment to persist, and allowing the mind to continue to long and yearn through these 5 sense bases and also the 6th. And then here the Buddha says, in what, monks, is inward rottenness? Here, someone is immoral, one of unwholesome character, of impure and suspect behavior, secretive in his acts, no ascetic, though claiming to be one, not a celibate, though claiming to be one, inwardly rotten, corrupt, wicked. This is called inward rottenness. So just like a log can get rotten on the inside, the Buddha is describing that in terms of a human being, that an individual can be immoral, have unwholesome character. They can be secretive in the way that they function in the world, not wanting others to know what they're doing. No ascetic, though claiming to be one. Now, if you think about during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were countless people who were putting on robes, shaving their hair, trying to get to this enlightened mental state. And not all the individuals who were doing that were actually making their way to enlightenment or choosing to truly practice. This is the same way it is today too. While there's several hundreds of thousands or millions of monks in the world, not all of them are actively on the path to enlightenment. They might be wearing the robe, they might be shaving their head, they might even be living at a temple, but they're not actually practicing. They're not learning, they're not reflecting, they're not practicing. And the Buddha talks about this in other discourses that he shares as well. So if somebody's claiming to be an ascetic, but they're not, this is a inward rottenness that the Buddha is describing. And the same thing is true about somebody who is claiming to be a celibate, meaning that claiming that they've given up sexual contact, but yet they're actually having sexual contact. This can actually exist today too, and it existed during the lifetime of the Buddha. So the Buddha is describing this as inwardly rotten, corrupt, wicked. This is what's going to lead to somebody not getting to enlightenment, that if they're immoral and have unwholesome character. So when you read chapters like this, you would like to understand what the Buddha is teaching so that you can eliminate these things. The Buddha teaches what's called the 5 hindrances at certain points in his teachings, and those are the 5 individual pollutions of the mind that are hindering one from getting to enlightenment. But here he's giving you much more deeper level of detail to help you see what's going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. And here you can learn these chapters, and then you can practice in such a way that you do things like eliminating the ego, that you protect and guard the mind, that you don't allow it to long and yearn through these sense bases, that you improve your moral conduct, and all these other things that the Buddha is talking about here. So let me know what questions you guys have. Again, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere, so I'm going to move to the next chapter, and I'll just remind those of you guys in Zoom, if you'd like to read it anytime, just let me know. Okay, chapter 3 is going to detail the 5 chords of sensual pleasure. That chapter is titled 5 chords of central pleasure. Monks, there are these 5 chords of central pleasure. What are the 5? 1. Forms recognizable by the eye that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with central desire, and provocative of craving. 2. Sounds recognizable by the ear that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with central desire, and provocative of craving. So he goes through the same thing here for odors, for flavors, for physical objects, recognizable by the body that are wished for, desired, agreeable, and likable, connected with central desire and provocative of craving. These are the 5 chords of central pleasure. So here, the 5 chords are this desire. It's the desire. It's the craving. That's what the chord is, right? So the mind is longing and yearning through the internal sense base for an external sense base. It's the longing and yearning for these things. That's what the chord is. As to those ascetics and Brahmins who are tied to these 5 chords of central pleasure, obsessed with them and completely committed to them, and who use them without seeing the danger in them or understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them, they have met with calamity, met with disaster. The evil one may do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer who was bound lay down on a heap of traps. It might be understood of him, he has met with calamity, met with disaster. The hunter can do with him as he likes, and when the hunter comes, he cannot go where he wants. As to those ascetics and Brahmin who are not tied to these 5 chords of central pleasure, who are not obsessed with them or completely committed to them, and who use them seeing the danger in them and understanding the escape from them, it may be understood of them, they have not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The evil one cannot do with them as he likes. Suppose a forest deer who was unbound lay down on a heap of traps. It might be understood of him, he has not met with calamity, not met with disaster. The hunter cannot do with him as he likes, and when the hunter comes, he can go where he wants. Suppose a forest deer is wandering in the forest wilds. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the hunter's range. So too, quite distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity. This follows with the 2nd jhana, the 3rd jhana, the 4th jhana. The space is infinite, the consciousness is infinite, the base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. The discourses are identical except for the reference to each. Again, by completely surmounting the base of neither perception nor non-perception, a monk enters upon and resides in the elimination of perception and feeling, and his taints are destroyed by his seeing with wisdom. This monk is said to have blindfolded Mara, to have become invisible to the evil one by depriving Mara's eye of its opportunity, and to have crossed beyond attachment to the world. He walks without fear, stands without fear, sits without fear, lies down without fear. Why is that? Because he is out of the evil one's range. Okay, let me help you guys understand this. We already talked about the 5 chords to understand what those are. And the Buddha is saying, okay, if an individual is tied to these 5 chords of central pleasure, then this is just like a deer being trapped. And now when you're in this trap, you're going to meet with calamity. And this evil one, referring to Mara, which is a formless being who is in the world interested in influencing unwholesome things to occur in the world. Some people might refer to Mara as the devil or Satan. This is a real actual being that functions in the world in a way to try to influence people to do unwholesome things. And the way that Mara gets to influence you is through the mind and influencing you with these various sensual pleasures that the mind is attached to. So the Buddha refers to Mara as the evil one. So here, if you have this cords of sensual pleasure and the mind is attached and obsessed with these things, Mara can easily pull you in one direction or the other. It's still your decisions. It's not Mara making the decisions. You're the one who's making these decisions, but it's easy for Mara to show you one thing or another and kind of pull you in the direction of a certain central desire, where then your mind will continue to make unwise decisions, because as long as it's longing and yearning and it gets pulled towards these central desires, you will experience discontentedness. And then when the mind's discontent, you're going to make unwise decisions that leads to unwholesome results. So Mara gets what it wants, which is unwholesome things to happen in the world. So just like a deer can be trapped and the hunter can do with it as it wants, Mara is the same way. Your mind can be the same way. If you have these 5 cords of central pleasure, Mara can do with you as he likes. Then the Buddha explains an individual who doesn't have these 5 cords of central pleasure, that you've worked to eliminate them and escape from them, then Mara can't do anything to you because you've eliminated the 5 cords of central pleasure. And this is like a deer lying down and they're unbound, that this hunter can't do with the deer as it wants because there's no binding. There's no way that the deer is trapped there. It's unbound. And now, as this deer walks through the forest, it is without fear. Just like a human being who gets to the first jhana can be without fear of Mara. Because once you get to the first jhana, then Mara can't do with you as he pleases, because now you've eliminated a certain amount of sensual desire. In the first jhana, you still have sensual desire, but you've distanced yourself from it to the point where Mara can't influence you any longer. And the Buddha describes this as blindfolding Mara. So these 4 jhanas are preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And there are certain qualities of mind that you'll experience. You'll experience a certain amount of joy as you're moving through the jhanas. And this is that unconditioned joy that is starting to flicker, much like a light flickers. When you turn on a light, it might flicker, 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 boom, and now it's on. The same thing is true as you're moving through the jhanas. In the first, second, and third stage of enlightenment, your qualities of enlightenment are starting to shine through more and more brightly. And as you eliminate all the 10 fetters, the mind will be enlightened in that 4th stage of enlightenment. But on your way there, the mind is experiencing these various qualities. The way you get to the jhanas is you learn and practice the Eightfold Path. That's what gets you to the jhanas. It's not just meditation that gets you to the jhanas. You wouldn't be able to meditate your way to the jhanas. You would need these other teachings on the Eightfold Path in order to experience these preliminary phases that the mind experiences as it moves to the jhanas. Then the Buddha is describing these other attainments here as well. This space is infinite. Consciousness is infinite. The base of nothingness, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. These are other attainments that one might experience. And I have those described in the book series. Let's see what else to talk about here. So yeah, I think we've talked about all of this so far. Let me see what questions you guys have on this particular chapter. Chapter 3, 5 cords of central pleasure. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 4. Chapter 4 is titled, One Who Guards the Doors of the 6 Sense Bases. And how is a monk guarded as to the doors of the 6 sense bases? Here, a monk seeing a form with the eye, he hears a sound with the ear, with the nose smells an odor, with the tongue tastes a flavor, with the body touches a physical object, with the mind he recognizes a mental object, does not grasp at the general features or at the details of them. Since craving and aversion, evil, unwholesome mental states might flow in upon one who dwells with the sense base of the eye uncontrolled, the sense base of the ear uncontrolled, the sense base of the nose uncontrolled, the sense base of the tongue uncontrolled, the sense base of the body uncontrolled, the sense base of the mind uncontrolled. He applies himself to such control. He sets a guard over the sense base of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, attains control of them. That is how a monk has the doors of the 6 sense bases guarded. Okay, so here, what the Buddha is helping you to understand is that if you understand central desire, that the mind has this pollution, this fetter, this taint, this defilement, where the mind is longing and yearning through the sense bases. And if you learn that, you independently reflect on it and you can practice and see the truth for yourself, that if you understand that this central desire exists in the mind and the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases, then you would like to guard these doorways. The eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind are the doorways to discontentedness. This is how discontentedness is going to be experienced in the mind. It's through some contact through these sense bases. So what you would like to do is develop this guard. What the guard is mindfulness. Your mindfulness is guarding the mind. And the Buddha talks about this specifically in other discourses. Here he doesn't call it out, but in other discourses he explains how your mindfulness or your awareness of mind, specifically the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that's your guard. So if you're walking down the street, if you're just kind of walking and just experiencing all the different things that you're experiencing, your mind can easily be pulled from one thing to the other. But if you have a guard, if you have mindfulness, if you have awareness of your mind, when you observe that craving, that longing, that yearning coming up in the mind, you can now restrain it. You can pull it back. But if you don't have that guard, if you don't have the mindfulness, you can't guard the doorways to discontentedness. So let me give you an example. One time I was eliminating coffee from my practice, and this was several years ago. And I knew that I needed to eliminate this because the caffeine was causing the mind to go up and down into excitement and even some depression and some anxiety and rapid speech and headaches and things like this. So I went like 3 or 4 days without drinking coffee at one point. And then I had a coffee. And then I went to a week. And then I had a coffee. And then I went to 2 weeks. And then I had a coffee. And then I went to 3 or 4 weeks. And then I ended up having a coffee. And then I got all the way to 8 weeks. And I thought that this craving was completely gone. And I was like, all right, sweet. I started getting all conceited, all arrogant, thinking that I was so great that I'd been eliminating all these cravings. And I let my guard down. And I was walking down the street and I happened to walk past a coffee shop and the aroma came out and I got a whiff of it. And boom, I was right into the coffee shop, standing in line, ordering my coffee. Well, when I was doing that at 8 weeks, I ended up drinking about a third or a half of the coffee. And then I realized, like, I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. And I threw away the coffee. And I said, that's the last time I'm ever going to drink coffee because I know what it does to me. And from that point forward, I realized that what I had done is I become conceited and I had let my guard down. So now, from that point forward, for a period of weeks and months, I had to have this guard. I had to have this mindfulness. So what I would do is I would walk down the street, and if I saw a coffee shop, I would switch to the other side of the street so I wouldn't get the aroma. And now I did that for several weeks or maybe a month or so. And then I got to the point where the craving I felt had been extinguished. So I just walked down the street, and if I smelt the aroma, then it was kind of testing my mind to see if I would go into the coffee shop. So I was guarding my mind as I would go past these coffee shops. And now, because that craving is completely gone, I can actually go into coffee shops. Students sometimes invite me in to talk, and they would like to have personal guidance. So they would like to go to a coffee shop. So maybe I order a smoothie or a bottle of water or something like this. So you can guard your mind while you're letting go of a craving and your mind is somewhat sensitive to that craving. You need to guard the mind with this mindfulness, like crossing the street or just being very aware of the mind as you're walking past a coffee shop, for example. But then as you completely eliminate the craving, you won't have to do that anymore because the craving will no longer be there. So your guard is having your mindfulness or awareness of mind of these certain cravings, desires, attachments that are in the mind as the mind's longing and yearning through these sense bases. And now you're gaining control of the mind with that mindfulness. That's what the Buddha is saying, is you need to attain control of these sense bases where you're aware of what the mind's doing. Because if the mind is uncontrolled, that's where you're going to follow that craving, desire, attachment, and you're going to be experiencing discontentedness at some point. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 5. 1 to reach growth, increase, and maturity in this training discipline. Monks, when a cattle worker possesses 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. What 11? Here, a cattle worker has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies' eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering places. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry. And he shows extra veneration to those bulls who are fathers and leaders of the herd. When a cattle worker possesses these 11 factors, he is capable of keeping and caring for a herd of cattle. So too, monks, when a monk possesses these 11 qualities, he is capable of growth, increase, and maturity in the teachings and discipline. What 11? Here, a monk has wisdom of form. He is skilled in characteristics. He removes flies' eggs. He dresses wounds. He smokes out the sheds. He knows the watering place. He knows what it is to have drunk. He knows the road. He is skilled in pastures. He does not milk dry. And he shows extra veneration to those elder monks of long standing who have long gone forth, the fathers and leaders of the community. How does a monk remove flies' eggs? Here, when a thought of sensual desire has arisen, a monk does not tolerate it. He abandons it, removes it, does away with it, and obliterates it. When a thought of ill will has arisen, when a thought of harming has arisen, when evil, unwholesome states have arisen, a monk does not tolerate them. He abandons them, removes them, does away with them, and obliterates them. That is how a monk removes flies' eggs. So let me pause here and help you guys understand what the Buddha is sharing. This is connected to right intention from the Eightfold Path. If you remember right intention, the Buddha talks about developing the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. So you need to have the right thinking or the right thought or the intention of eliminating sensual desire, having renunciation, where you're interested in eliminating unwholesomeness through your life practice and developing that. You need to have the thinking or the thought or the intention to eliminate ill will from the mind, where you can practice non-ill will. And also eliminating the thought or thinking or intention of harming, because as long as you're harming other beings, harm is going to come back to you. So here, in order to get to enlightenment, the Buddha is saying that you would need to be able to not tolerate, you need to abandon and remove and do away with and obliterate sensual desire. The same thing with ill will, that you're going to need to obliterate that. And the same thing with the thought of harming, that you obliterate that. And the Buddha is using an analogy here about herding cattle, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, a lot of people were farmers. So they would have understood this. And if they weren't a cattle herder, they probably knew somebody who was, and they would understand these things. So here, if you've been around cattle at all, or if you've been around farm animals, that's what the Buddha's describing to help you to be able to understand what he's describing is removing flies' eggs out of the cattle is like removing sensual desire out of the mind, removing ill will out of the mind, removing the thought of harming out of the mind, being disinterested and incapable of having these evil, unwholesome states in the mind. And this requires one to apply right effort from the Eightfold Path, to apply the effort to eliminate these unwholesome qualities out of the mind. Now this next one, he says, how does a monk dress wounds? Here, on seeing a form with the eye, a monk does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye sense base unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of craving and aversion might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye sense base. He undertakes the restraint of the eye sense base. On hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a physical object with the body, on recognizing a mental object with the mind, a monk does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the mind sense base unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of craving and aversion might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the mind sense base. He undertakes the restraint of the mind sense base. That is how a monk dresses wounds. Here, only 2 of the 11 factors are shared, as these 2 apply to central desire in the 6 sense bases. See the included reference for the entire teaching. Okay, so here, what dressing the wound is that if you understand that the mind is longing and yearning through these 6 sense bases, then you know this is like a defilement, this is a taint, this is a pollution, and you would like to address this, because if you allow the mind to be unguarded and the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases, then there's going to be this craving that's going to continue to persist. If you do nothing about your craving, it will continue to persist, and it will probably grow and expand and deepen. And if you have craving, not only are you going to chase after pleasant things, but then when painful things occur, you're going to push that away. That's going to be the aversion, where the mind is pushing that away. And you're not interested in either craving, longing, yearning after something, or you're pushing with aversion and pushing things out of your life. This is going to just continue to cause problems and havoc in your life. So by dressing the wound, you're going to be practicing the mindfulness to guard the mind and realize that as the cravings arise in the mind, that you can restrain the mind and you can cut it off and let it go. That here the Buddha says that your mind does not grasp at its signs and features. That means like what the mind is longing and yearning for through the sense base. So let me give you an example here. Here, this first one, he's talking about the eye, and there are certain forms. So let's just say you have a certain craving for sexual contact. Let's just say you're in a relationship with a certain person, but you have this overwhelming craving for sexual contact with multiple people. And now you're maybe walking in the mall shopping, and this handsome man or this beautiful woman walks in front of you. If you grasp at the signs and features, you're going to be looking at every little detail on their body. Like, wow, look how built his chest is. Look how round his shoulders are. Look at his rear end. Look at his face just chiseled so nice. Oh, his hair is so handsome. And then the same thing with a female, right? Somebody can be looking at a female in the same way. This is grasping at the signs and features of that physical form. And now your mind is longing and yearning. If you leave this eye unguarded, then that's what the mind's going to do. It's going to grasp at the signs and features of whatever, whether it's through the eye, through the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. But what the Buddha is saying is if you dress the wounds, then you're practicing to restrain the mind. You're noticing that, there's that craving for that beautiful woman or that handsome man. Let me restrain the mind. Maybe what I do is I walk away. So let's just say you're walking in the mall and there's somebody in front of you and you're following this person who just happens to be walking in front of you. And maybe you're looking at their hips shake back and forth. You're looking at the shape of their calves. You're looking at their back and their neck, and your mind is just obsessed with the signs and features of this individual. What you would like to do, instead of allowing the mind to do that, is as soon as you're walking behind this person and you feel the craving coming up in the mind, you would like to redirect the mind. Walk to the other side of the aisleway or maybe duck into a store and stay in there for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, maybe look around, let this person pass. So now when you go back out into the mall and you're walking, you're no longer behind that person. That's restraining your mind. Whereas if you continued to walk behind that person and you grasped at the signs and features, you're just allowing the craving to pollute the mind, and now there's going to be this discontentedness. And you might actually act upon that craving, and now maybe you have sexual misconduct and you cause damage to your existing relationship, and you're headed for all kinds of difficulties in that situation. So the Buddha is describing to dress the wounds is to practice this mindfulness and this restraint, that you restrain the mind when you see it longing and yearning with craving, desire, attachment. So these other factors are in this book series here. This is a very interesting discourse that the Buddha has in talking about this cattle worker. So if you're interested in all 11 factors, you'll see them as you go through the entire book series. That here we're just talking about 2 of the 11 because it addresses the central desire. So it looks like we have a question here from Francis. You guys are also welcome to ask your questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. But here, let me explain and read Francis's question, and then I'll answer it. Could you give 1 or 2 examples of the 6 sense base of mental objects? Yeah, so I gave the one, like, say you're at work and you've planned a holiday or a vacation, and now your mind is longing and yearning for that thing in the future. There hasn't been any contact. You're not seeing anything, you're not hearing anything, you're not smelling anything, you're not tasting anything. There's nothing that's come in terms of the bodily contact. You're maybe just daydreaming about this future vacation that you're going to take in 3 months. And now your mind is discontent with conditioned pleasant feelings. And now you're having so much pleasure and so much excitement with that mental object. Now, let's just say 3 months later, when you show up to the airport, now your flight is delayed or your flight is canceled. You're going to be agitated. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be angry, perhaps, because your mind was having craving for this vacation and you were longing and yearning through the sense base. Now, when you go to the airport, you're going to have problems with that. And then also maybe something from the past. Say that you got in a fight as a child, and say that your mind is clinging to this where you got maybe beat up on the playground. And now say 15, 20 years later, you're thinking about that situation, and now you're experiencing painful feelings of what transpired from 15 or 20 years ago. The same thing can happen with physical abuse as with sexual abuse and other things, that your mind can oftentimes cling to these experiences, and you need to be able to liberate the mind from that so it's no longer clinging. You'll always have memories that these things occurred, but when you eliminate the longing and yearning, the clinging in the mind, then you can liberate the mind of the discontent feelings. But you'll always have memories that those things did occur, but it won't affect the condition of your mind in the present moment. Let me know if you need any more examples than that, Francis, and maybe you can even come up with some yourself as well. Okay, so we have some here coming in on YouTube. Vladimir is asking, if I used to drink energy drinks in the past, but I'm stopping to use them, but I have free energy drinks from Red Bull because I was worked in the media industry, so the company provides it. Drinks for me, should I give them to other people who have cravings to drinks? And as well, if I have alcohol as gifts from the past, so actually these substances unhealthy, but throwing them away is a waste that is opposite to generosity. What should be done to use them? Wealthy. For example, we know that your friend or a stranger will buy alcohol anyway, so we give it for free to help him save money and to not waste the unhealthy product this person needs and you already have. Okay, so Vladimir, when it comes to these kind of substances, if I was you, I would throw them away. Because what would you do if you had some leftover cocaine, right? Are you going to give it to somebody else, right? So these substances are going to promote an unhealthy condition of the mind. And by you giving that to somebody, you're just giving them those kinds of things. If they're going to spend their money to go buy those things, then they're going to experience the results of that. But by you giving those things away, you're enabling them to now promote heedlessness in their mind. So if I was you, I would destroy all of those things, dump it down the drain or in the sewer or whatever, because you giving it to someone is only you producing unwise decisions that's going to then produce unwholesome results. There's an individual here that says, I truly appreciate your lessons. Thank you. You're welcome. Pleased to help you. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions. Oh, here we go. Mayu Lee has a question on Facebook. She says, hello, teacher and classmates. I don't ingest or take anything that would alter my mind, but I would like to make wild mushrooms, herbs, tincture, using alcohol to extract the benefit properties for health reasons. Is that okay? If I ingest a few drops of the tincture, would that consider breaking the 5 precepts? So remember, the teachings of the Buddha, it's not rules. It's not about what's okay or not okay. It's about understanding the underlying aspect of the cause and effect, this natural law of Gotama. Certain actions are going to produce a certain result. So you would like to clean up your practice, understanding the natural law of Gotama, that anytime you make an unwise decision, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And anytime you make a wise decision, it's going to produce wholesome results. All unwise decisions are based in craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. All wholesome decisions and all wise decisions that produce wholesome results are based in generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So if it was me, I wouldn't ingest anything, not even a drop of alcohol, like what you're describing here, because that would promote heedlessness in the mind. Even though it's just a drop, you're probably not going to get drunk, but then there's that central desire where your mind is attached to that particular flavor, that particular taste. You would like to clean up your practice so that you get rid of every last little drop of unwise decisions, every last little drop of unwholesomeness in your life. So if I was you, I wouldn't ingest any substances that cause heedlessness, including what you're describing here, because you are taking strong drink and sloth-producing substances, the heedlessness. Even though you're not taking it to the point of heedlessness, there's still that central desire of the tongue that you're looking for that particular flavor. And now at any point, your mind might decide 3 months from now, 6 months from now, to indulge in that further and go deeper into it. You'd like to purify everything. In terms of food going into the body and in terms of liquids going into the body, the purpose of putting liquid into the body is to hydrate the body. The thing that hydrates the body the best is water. That's the best thing that hydrates the body. And then there's other things out there, like there's nut milks, there's soy milks, there's coconut water, there's fruit juices, like fresh fruit juices. Anything you put into the body, either food or liquid, it's going to produce some kind of result. So you would like to be observant about what you put into the body and clean up your practice where you're not just having central desire for any particular thing that could promote an unhealthy condition in the body. Because if you have an unhealthy condition in the body, you're not going to be able to promote a healthy mind. So you would like to give the mind the best opportunity to exist in a healthy environment. So by you ingesting certain foods and certain liquids that are promoting health of the physical body, this is going to give the mind a healthy environment in which to live in, because the body and the mind are coming together, and you would like the body to be as healthy as possible so that the mind has the best opportunity to be able to train and get to enlightenment. Great questions, guys. Really wonderful to see you guys asking these kinds of questions. All right. I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. You're welcome, Francis. Pleased to help you, sir. So let me move on to the next chapter. And it's chapter 6, so it's halftime. I'm going to take a little drink of water here. All right. So this one is titled The 3 Underlying Tendencies. Here the Buddha is going to be talking about craving, anger, and ignorance, or the unwholesome roots, the 3 poisons, the 3 fires. Monks, dependent on the I in forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling, felt as pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Dependent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Okay, we're going to cover these other ones, but let me explain to you what the Buddha is teaching so that then you can understand as I read the rest of them. So the Buddha is saying, okay, this internal sense base of the nose and this external sense base of the odor, these two things, when the mind becomes aware of it, this is called nose consciousness. So there's the nose, and then there's the odor. And when the mind becomes aware of the odor, this is called nose consciousness. There's awareness of what's being experienced through the nose. So the meeting of these three things, the Buddha is calling contact. And this is really important for you because when you study dependent origination and you study the natural law of Gama, you're going to need to know what is contact. Well, contact is three things. It's the internal sense base, it's the external sense base, and it's the mind having awareness of that external sense base. That's the nose consciousness. So these three things coming together is called contact. And now when there's contact through any of the six sense bases, now there's going to be a conditioned pleasant feeling that is arising, or there's going to be a painful feeling, or there's going to be a feeling that is neither painful nor pleasant. Because when there's craving in the mind of longing and yearning for something specific, now when you have contact with that particular object, now the mind's going to experience conditioned pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant. So let's use the example of the music. So if you're in a car, the ear hears this person's music next to you, and the mind then becomes aware of this music. And then because there is craving in the mind that you enjoy this music, you have a certain particular music, you like drums, you like bass, you like rap music or hard rock or whatever it is, because of that craving, when there's this contact, when the ear, the sound are experienced, and now there's the awareness of it through ear consciousness, this contact with the music, now you experience pleasant feelings, right? But now you move up to the next light, and now somebody's playing some classical piano, and maybe you despise that music. You hear it through the ear, because there's the ear, then there's the sound, then there's the consciousness or the awareness of it that comes to the mind, and this is called contact. And now that you've had contact with that music of classical piano, and there's a craving in the mind that you want to hear rap music, you want to hear hard rock, and now you hear that classical music, there's a painful feeling, frustration, annoyment, agitation, right? So this is how these conditioned feelings are being experienced. The Buddha is explaining to you how your mind's functioning. He's explaining to you the natural laws of existence so that then when you learn it, you can reflect on it like I'm showing you here through examples, and now eventually you can start practicing where you're guarding the mind in these kinds of situations. So let me just keep going. He says, dependent on the tongue and flavors, tongue consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Dependent on the body and physical objects, body consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Dependent on the mind and mental objects, mind consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Okay, so there he was just explaining to you what contact is and how the feelings that are arising in your mind are conditioned on contact. The feelings in your mind are dependent on contact. If you don't have contact through the 6 sense bases, you're not going to experience the pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Contact is a condition in order for these feelings to arise. Craving is as well. You need to have craving in the mind for a conditioned feeling to arise. So he's just introducing you to that. So now he says, one is touched by a pleasant feeling. If one excites in it, welcomes it, and remains holding to it, then the underlying tendency to crave lies within one. When one is touched by a painful feeling, if one sorrows, grieves, and has displeasure, weeps, beating one's breast, and becomes distraught, then the underlying tendency to aversion lies within one. When one is touched by a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, if one does not understand as it actually is the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in regards to that feeling, then the underlying tendency to ignorance, unknowing of true reality, lies within one. So let me explain what he's talking about here. He's talking about craving, he's talking about anger or aversion, and then he's talking about ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. These are the 3 underlying tendencies. These are the 3 poisons: craving, anger, and ignorance, or the 3 unwholesome roots: craving, anger, and ignorance. Some people refer to it as greed, hatred, and delusion, and there's other ways as well. So what's happened to us in our life, let's go all the way back to childhood. At some point, somebody gave us a piece of chocolate or put a piece of chocolate in our mouth. And when we had that contact, that the tongue came in contact with this flavor of chocolate, then when the mind became aware of it because of tongue consciousness, there was that contact, and now there was this pleasant feeling that arose in the mind, this happiness based on that flavor. Then we excited in it. We welcomed it. We remained holding on to it. And then there was this underlying tendency to crave, that we started craving and longing and yearning. So now when we went to the store and we saw the chocolate, we were like, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy, buy me some chocolate, buy me some chocolate, buy me some chocolate. We're craving because we want those pleasant feelings that we get through that flavor of the chocolate. So then each time we go to the store, mommy and daddy keep buying us chocolate. But at some point with this craving in the mind, we go into the store and we're like, mommy, daddy, buy me chocolate, buy me chocolate. They say, no, you're not getting chocolate today. Now, because you didn't get your craving fulfilled, you experience this painful feeling of anger, frustration, sadness, or some other discontent feeling. You have this sorrow, this grief, this displeasure. You're beating your breast. You're distraught, right? We're distraught. Oh my goodness, I'm not going to get chocolate today. Oh my goodness, right? So now there's this underlying tendency to aversion. Now we push mom away. We're grumpy. We're irritable. We think mom and dad are causing us to be angry because we have wrong view. We're only 3 years old. We're 5 years old. So we have this aversion, this anger, this hostility, this bitterness. We think mom and dad are the worst people on earth at this point, right? And now where all of this is coming from is this is coming from our ignorance, our unknowing of true reality. We have no idea at that point in our life that it's our craving that is causing this aversion to arise because we have this ignorance and this unknowing of true reality. So now what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're looking to arise wisdom so that now you can eliminate your cravings and you can eliminate your aversion, your anger, hatred, and ill will. But you need to first eliminate your ignorance. You need to be working on that. And that's why you're learning, you're reflecting to independently verify, and you're practicing to be able to get to this wisdom. Okay, so part of that wisdom that you need is you need to understand the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. The cause of all of this is craving, desire, attachment, the central desire. The disappearance is the universal truth of impermanence, understanding that these objects are not permanent, that as long as you allow your mind to crave, then you're not going to get your cravings fulfilled permanently. It's not possible for you to experience this gratification, which is the pleasant feelings. You can't get that gratification permanently. And the danger is that your mind can move to these painful feelings. And the escape from all of this is the Eightfold Path. So in order to eliminate what's going on in the mind and causing these discontent feelings, we need to arise wisdom of how to eliminate craving and anger, or craving and aversion. And the way that you understand that is understand the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. So the Eightfold Path is the escape to all of this. And that's why it's the core central teaching of the Buddha. Now the Buddha says, monks, that one shall here and now make an end of discontentedness without abandoning the underlying tendency to crave for pleasant feelings, without abolishing the underlying tendency to aversion towards painful feelings, without eliminating the underlying tendency to ignorance, the unknowing of true reality in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feelings, without abandoning ignorance and arousing true wisdom, this is impossible. So what he's saying is, if you're interested in eliminating discontentedness, if you're trying to end that, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to eliminate and abandon this ignorance by arousing true wisdom. And that true wisdom is going to help you to eliminate craving and aversion. But if you don't eliminate, right, without abandoning ignorance and arousing true wisdom, it is impossible for you to end your discontentedness. It's just not possible. You can't believe your way to enlightenment. You can't meditate your way to enlightenment. You need meditation. That's part of the wisdom that you arouse, but you need all this other wisdom as well in order to get to enlightenment. And that's how you make an end of discontentedness. Without getting this true wisdom, you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So what questions do you guys have on this particular chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand electronically and ask any questions that you like in Zoom. Francis, you have a question? Go ahead.
Okay. Regarding your sharing on the elimination of the craving through wisdom, I thought about it is that if it could be that you apply the law of impermanence, that all these pleasant feelings or painful feelings are temporary. So I just say that these feelings are just temporary, they're impermanent, so I just let it go. Is that something that I can do?
Yeah, so recognizing, one second, I'm going to pour this glass of water. So recognizing that the conditioned pleasant feelings are temporary, and that as long as you allow the mind to have conditioned pleasant feelings, it's only a matter of time before you end up in the painful feelings. Recognizing that, then what you would like to do is restrain the mind from the conditioned pleasant feelings so that you can get to the unconditioned joy, the unconditioned happiness. If you keep allowing the mind to have conditioned pleasant feelings, they're only temporary. They arise, they change, and they fade away, because the mind is basing it on some impermanent condition. So this is why I use the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness rather than suffering. Because if you think you're eliminating suffering, you're probably only going to focus on the painful feelings. But if you understand when your mind's having conditioned pleasant feelings, that it's discontent, it's experiencing discontentedness because it's uncalm, it's shaken up. So now you can restrain the mind. You won't be able to eliminate the painful feelings if you don't understand that the pleasant feelings of conditioned pleasant feelings are also a problem. So you would like to be able to recognize that these conditioned pleasant feelings are basically unsatisfactory because they're just temporary. They arise, change, and fade away because they're based on some condition. And when you see that, and you see the truth in that, then you become more dedicated to eliminating conditioned pleasant feelings, because you need to be willing to let go of the temporary pleasure in order to get to the permanent joy in the mind. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. Seeing some thank yous there from Mayu Lee. You're welcome, pleased to help you. So we'll move on to the next chapter here, which is chapter 7. Who seeks excitement and discontentedness is not freed from discontentedness. So this is what we were just talking about, Francis. Monks, one who seeks excitement in form seeks excitement and discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in feeling seeks excitement and discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in perception seeks excitement and discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in volitional formations, choices, and decisions seeks excitement and discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in consciousness seeks excitement and discontentedness. One who seeks excitement and discontentedness, I say, is not freed from discontentedness. So here the Buddha is talking about the 5 aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, and consciousness. This is what makes a living being a living being. He provides these 5 aggregates, or 5 elements, or 5 collections, 5 things that determine what a living being is. A living being is going to have physical form, and you can independently verify this as I'm teaching it to you because you know you're a living being. You have physical form. Then a living being is going to have feelings. That's the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. Those are the conditioned feelings. Then there's going to be perceptions. These are your views and opinions of the world, the way you look out at the world, certain assumptions that you're making. Then there's volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, that you make certain choices and decisions. Then there's a consciousness. This is the mind itself. So form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and consciousness. Every living being is going to have these 5 aggregates. So you can look at yourself, you can look at dogs, you can look at cats, you can look at a cow, a bat, a snake, a worm. They have these 5 aggregates, okay? But then you can take something that you know isn't a living being. Like I'm at a desk right now. This desk has physical form, but it doesn't have feelings. It doesn't have perceptions. It doesn't have volitional formations. This desk can't choose to pick itself up and relocate itself. And it doesn't have a consciousness. So here you can independently verify that yes, the Buddha has indeed given a description of what a living being is. And what he's saying is if you excite in this form, then you're seeking excitement and discontentedness. So let me give you an example. Let's just say you have a life partner and you guys met at the age of 20, and now you guys have formed this relationship, and wow, you're really craving this physical beauty or handsomeness of your partner, and you guys are very youthful, and wow, they look so beautiful and so handsome. And now as you guys are together and you age, maybe you get to 35, you get to 40, you get to 45, impermanence is taking its toll, and now there's wrinkles, there's gray hair, there's maybe fat in places that there wasn't before. If your mind's seeking excitement in physical form, now as you see this person age, you're going to be discontent. So if you seek excitement in this physical form when you're young, now when you age, your mind's going to be experiencing painful feelings. So understanding that pleasant feelings is part of the problem, then you can avoid the painful feelings. And this is also true about your own physical body. If when you're youthful, you're like, oh wow, I'm so handsome, I'm so beautiful, look at me, I'm so young and so vibrant. Then as you age and you see a wrinkle, you see a gray hair, you're losing your hair, you seeking excitement in form at the age of 20 or 25 and seeing your youthfulness. Now when you're 55 or 65 or 85, you can experience those painful feelings. So by seeking excitement in form, meaning you're clinging and craving, and now you're getting conditioned feelings based on the form, then you're going to experience these discontent feelings. And the same thing is true about the feelings themselves, that if you're seeking excitement feelings, or you have excitement in your perceptions, your views and opinions about how you view the world, about your choices and decisions, if you have excitement there, if you have a certain excitement of your consciousness, then you're just going to keep experiencing discontentedness over and over because you're not freed from discontentedness. You're still chasing after those pleasant feelings. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next one, which is very similar to that one. This is chapter 8. It's actually the exact same thing, but instead of the 5 aggregates, he's talking about the 6 sense bases. So who seeks excitement in the 6 sense bases seeks excitement in discontentedness. Monks. One who seeks excitement in the eye seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in the ear seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in the nose seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in the tongue seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in the body seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in the mind seeks excitement in discontentedness. One who seeks excitement in discontentedness, I say, is not freed from discontentedness. So here, the same thing, as long as the mind is wanting excitement, this craving, desire, attachment is in there for this conditioned feeling of excitement, now you're going to continue to dwell in discontentedness. So you need to understand those pleasant feelings are part of the problem. Remember, it's the conditioned pleasant feelings that because it's sunny outside, I'm going to get excited. But now when it rains, you're going to get sad. Because I hear music that is agreeable to me, I'm going to get excited. But now when I hear music that is disagreeable, you get angry or frustrated or agitated. Now when the nose smells certain odors that are agreeable, if you allow the mind to get excited, now when you smell things that aren't favorable to you, now you're going to get the painful feelings. So the Buddha is explaining to you that the pleasant feelings are part of the problem. That's a big part of the problem. That's what the mind is doing. It's longing, yearning, and craving for these pleasant feelings, craving things to be permanently comfortable, craving things to be permanently agreeable, craving things to be permanently pleasurable. But that's not possible as long as there's craving in the mind. By the time you get rid of craving, yes, everything will always be joyful. You will enjoy everything. No matter what you're doing in life, you will always enjoy it. But as long as you have craving, you're going to see some things as agreeable and some things as disagreeable. So you're going to want some things and you're going to be repulsed by other things. But when you get rid of the craving, you just understand, okay, this is just what is, and you can enjoy whatever is. You're not craving for something other than what you currently have, right? That's what the whole mind does when there's craving, desire, attachment. So do you guys have any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move on to chapter 9. Chapter 9 is titled, One Dwelling with Craving as a Partner. Venerable Sir, in what way is one dwelling with a partner? There are, student, forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk seeks excitement in them, welcomes them, and remains holding to them, excitement arises. When there is excitement, there is obsession of mind. When there is obsession of mind, there is bondage. Bound by the fetter of sensual desire, student, a monk is called one dwelling with a partner. There are, student, sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk seeks excitement in them, he is called one dwelling with a partner. Student, even though a monk who dwells thus resorts to forest and groves, to remote lodgings, where there are few sounds and little noise, unoccupied, hidden from people, appropriate for seclusion, he is still called one dwelling with a partner. For what reason? Because craving is his partner, and he has not abandoned it. Therefore, he is called one dwelling with a partner. Venerable Sir, in what way is one a lone dweller? There are, student, forms recognizable by the eye that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek excitement in them, does not welcome them, and does not remain holding to them, excitement is eliminated. When there is no excitement, there is no obsession of mind. When there is no obsession of mind, there is no bondage. Released from the fetter of sensual desire, student, A monk is called a lone dweller. There are, student, sounds recognizable by the ear, odors recognizable by the nose, flavors recognizable by the tongue, physical objects recognizable by the body, mental objects recognizable by the mind, that are desirable, lovely, agreeable, pleasing, sensually enticing, tempting. If a monk does not seek excitement in them, he is called a lone dweller. Student, even though a monk who dwells, thus lives in the vicinity of a village, associating with male and female ordained practitioners, with male and female household practitioners, with kings and royal ministers, with sectarian teachers and their disciples, he is called a lone dweller. For what reason? Because craving is his partner, and he has abandoned it. Therefore, he is called a lone dweller. So here, the Buddha is describing craving, desire, attachment as you dwelling with a partner, because you got to feed this craving, right? If you have craving, desire, attachment for the newest, greatest iPhone or other electronic device, you got to feed that. You got to chase and chase and chase. You got to work really, 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 really hard to be able to get and stay current with those modern tools, right? And then if you want the newest car and you want the biggest house, you want the best clothes, you want the most money, you got to chase and chase and chase and chase and chase. You're feeding this partner. The mind becomes obsessed because of this conditional excitement. Rather than pursuing your needs, the mind is pursuing its wants. It's just chasing and chasing and chasing. So the Buddha is describing this as one dwelling with a partner, because the mind is longing and yearning through these sense bases. But he then describes a lone dweller, that when you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, when you eliminate central desire, you're no longer going to be chasing. You're going to be fulfilling your needs. There are certain needs that you have in the world, and you're going to need certain things, and you'll be able to fulfill those needs. But when you have craving, desire, attachment, you're going to have these wants that you're chasing rather than just fulfilling your needs. So it's elimination of craving, desire, attachment that will reduce your workload, because you're not going to have to keep chasing after things. When you're chasing, you'll get to the end of your day and you'll be exhausted sometimes because you've just been chasing all day long. And in certain situations, you got what you wanted, and in other situations, you didn't get what you want. So now when you get home from work, you're just completely exhausted. You're wiped out because your mind has been chasing and chasing and chasing. But when you're a lone dweller, when you don't have to feed this craving, you can just go through life and you can enjoy every single moment that you're experiencing, because you're not having to feed this craving. With craving, the mind can only have pleasant feelings when it gets what it wants, but it can't permanently get what it wants. So sometimes when it doesn't get what it wants, it gets those painful feelings, and now you're completely wiped out because you've been chasing things all day. This is the obsession of the mind. That is when there's bondage in the mind. But when you eliminate central desire, there is no obsession. There is no bondage. The fetter of central desire is eliminated from the mind. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So we'll go to today's last chapter, which is chapter 10. And this is the exact same chapter that we read earlier, but now the Buddha is taking it in the reverse. Before, he was talking to you about the cattle worker and these 11 factors and the things that lead to enlightenment, and he was describing it in the positive. Here, he's talking about it in the opposite, which is incapable. So what he says is that one who does not remove fly eggs is incapable of essentially getting to enlightenment. That if you do not abandon your central desire, if you do not abandon the ill will, if you do not abandon the harming, then these evil and wholesome mental states are going to arise, and then you tolerate it. You don't abandon it. You don't remove it. You don't do away with it. You don't obliterate it. You're failing to remove the fly eggs. Then you're not actually making your way to enlightenment. The mind is actually complacent. And then the same thing he describes as failing to dress wounds is one who does grasp at the signs and features, who allows the craving to persist, that you don't restrain the mind. You don't undertake restraint of these sense bases. So you're not practicing mindfulness. You do not guard the mind, right? So if you're going to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to do what that previous chapter was describing. Here he's just describing it in the reverse, so you can read it in both ways. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter or any of the chapters that we've covered today, or anything that you would like to discuss related to your practice? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom electronically and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So what I'll do then is just remind you guys that next week on Saturday, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters. So we're going to be in chapter 11 through chapter 20. And you can read those before class and or after class, and you'll get a lot more benefit that way, because you've got the words of the Buddha and you got the reflections from me to be able to help you along to understand how to practice these teachings and how to understand them for your practice. So if you aren't reading those chapters, I encourage you to do that so that you can gain the most benefit out of these classes. And then you're welcome to come to class. Even if you haven't read, you're always welcome to come to class. But if you have read either before or after, you're going to get so much more benefit out of the actual chapters. Tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be teaching Volume 1, Chapter 5, which is the Eightfold Path, the path for all humans to enlightenment. If it's been a while since you've studied this, or you've never studied the Eightfold Path with the original words of the Buddha, this is really helpful for you. You're going to need to study the original words of the Buddha in order to get to enlightenment. And the Eightfold Path is the core central teaching. So understanding that is what's going to help you to get to enlightenment. Without understanding the Eightfold Path, you wouldn't be able to make it to enlightenment. The Buddha describes this in his teachings, that any collection of teachings that doesn't contain the Eightfold Path, there isn't going to be anybody who's able to get to enlightenment. So in order for you to get to enlightenment, you would need to know the Eightfold Path. And then on Wednesdays, I'm going to be in part 2 of a 4-part series where I'm teaching Buddhist chanting. So you're welcome to attend that. Even if you didn't attend part 1, you're welcome to attend that. In all of these classes, I'm teaching Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. So you're going to need to look to see what time zone you're in and what time that is. In the mornings, I'm teaching from the temple, and in the evenings, I'm teaching at home here. And you can attend these classes live, or you can watch the replay, because they're recorded in Facebook, YouTube, and on our podcast. So you're welcome to access them that way. And then as you need help, you can ask questions in classes, you can post it in the Facebook group, you can send a private message, or you can schedule a personal guidance session through our website. You'll be able to schedule that session and then meet with me privately one-on-one in Zoom. So thank you all for joining today. Thank you for deciding that today's a day for you to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. Perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.